The first crack appeared on a Tuesday. I remember because I had just gotten home from a site visit in Raleigh, a 2-day trip I'd cut short to surprise my wife, Carolyn, for our 19th anniversary. I walked in carrying a bouquet of garden roses from the florist on Elm, her favorite, and the house smelled like something expensive. Candles, maybe. Or her perfume. I called her name and got silence, then the sound of the shower running upstairs. I set the roses in a vase. I loosened my tie. I noticed her phone face down on the kitchen counter, which wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the way it kept buzzing every few minutes, even after the shower stopped. She came downstairs in her robe, saw me, and the look on her face lasted maybe half a second before she smiled. But I'd been married to that woman for 19 years. I knew her face the way I knew the blueprints I worked on every day. Every line, every angle. What was supposed to be there and what wasn't. That half second said everything. I didn't say anything about it. I handed her the roses. She kissed me and said she was glad I was home early. We had a quiet dinner, opened a bottle of red, and she told me about her week. I listened. I smiled. And in the back of my mind, something I couldn't name yet had already started to pull apart. My name is Owen Stafford. I'm 46 years old. I run a mid-size architecture firm in Charlotte, North Carolina that I built from 3 employees to 22 over the past 12 years. I'm telling you this not to impress you, but because it matters to the story. The kind of man I am, the kind of work I do. I am someone who reads a structure before it collapses. I see the stress points. I notice when a load-bearing wall has been quietly compromised. Carolyn and I met in grad school at UNC. She was in urban planning, I was in architecture. We were both 24, broke, surviving on coffee and ambition, and we were inseparable within a month of meeting. We married young, 27, which everyone said was too soon. We bought a house at 30 when nobody thought we could afford it. We had our son, Aiden, at 31, and our daughter, Leah, at 34. By the time we hit our mid-40s, we were that couple other couples looked at and said, yeah, they figured it out. I thought we had. After that Tuesday, I started paying a different kind of attention. Not paranoid, not obsessive. Just the way I'd look at a building that doesn't quite sit right. Careful, patient, systematic. I noticed she laughed at her phone more than she used to. She started going to the gym at hours that didn't quite make sense for her schedule. She ordered new clothes online. Nothing dramatic, just small things. A different perfume. A new haircut, she said, was just for a change. She was also, in the same stretch of weeks, extraordinarily attentive to me. Making elaborate dinners. Reaching for my hand during movies. Being warmer and more present in the evenings than she'd been in years. I know that sounds backwards, but I've since learned it's common. The guilt doing double duty. The overcorrection that's meant to feel like love. I almost let myself believe it was love. 6 weeks after that Tuesday, I hired a private investigator. I want to be honest about that because people always have a reaction. Some people think it's extreme. Some people think it's cowardly. I'm neither extreme nor cowardly. I'm methodical. I wasn't going to blow up a 19-year marriage on a feeling. I needed to know what I was actually dealing with. His name was Lou Pratt. He'd been recommended to me by an attorney friend, quietly. The way these things get recommended. He was in his late 50s, wore reading glasses, had the energy of a retired professor. He didn't promise me anything dramatic. He said he'd tell me what was there. He called me on a Friday afternoon 3 weeks later. He said he'd sent the report to a secure link. He said, before I opened it, that I should probably not be alone when I looked at it. I told him I'd be fine. I wasn't fine. Her name was in the report. And so was the name of the man she'd been meeting. His name was Connor Webb. He was 40, a contractor who worked in commercial renovation, and his company had done a project with Carolyn's urban planning department about 8 months ago. Mid-rise development near South End. She'd been on the city liaison team. There were photographs, lunch meetings that ran 3 hours, a hotel in Dilworth, his car in a parking structure near her office, a coffee shop booth where they sat very close for people who were just colleagues. I closed the laptop. I went to the kitchen and stood there for a while. Then I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon, sat down at the dining room table, the same table where we'd had 100 dinners, and I thought. Not about leaving. Not yet. Not about confronting her. Not yet. I thought about the problem the way I think about any structural problem. What do I actually know? What don't I know? And what needs to happen next? What I knew, she had been seeing this man for most of the past year. She had lied to me systematically and deliberately, while also working to keep me emotionally close so I wouldn't notice. The affection had been a management strategy, not cruelty necessarily, but a kind of quiet, continuous dishonesty that had been running underneath our life like a gas leak, invisible, odorless, until it wasn't. What I didn't know, whether she wanted to end the marriage, whether this was something she planned to stop, whether there was anything left on her side that I could actually call love. I sat there for a long time. I didn't want to be one of those men who explodes. I'd watched that happen to a friend of mine. His wife cheated, he found out. He came unglued. He sent accusatory texts at 2 a.m. He showed up at her office. He raged and wept and begged in the same breath. He looked in the end like a man who'd lost himself. His wife didn't come back, and everyone who'd witnessed it carried a different memory of him than the one he would have chosen. I didn't want that. I also, and this is the part I'm still working through, didn't want to lose her. Not right away. Not in a rage. I wanted the truth. And I wanted to decide my response clearly, not reactively. So I did something that surprised me. I called my older brother, Dean. He's 53, lives in Asheville, retired early from his law practice. We talk maybe twice a month. He's one of those people who listens more than he speaks, and when he does speak, he doesn't waste words. I drove up to see him that Saturday. I told him everything. He didn't say much for a while. Then he said, "What do you want to walk away with?" Not what do you want to do. Not what does she deserve. What do you want to walk away with? I said I wanted to walk away with my dignity. I said I didn't want my kids to see their father humiliated. I said that whatever happened next, I wanted to be someone I recognized when it was over. He nodded. Then don't do anything in heat. You get one shot at this. Make it count. I drove home and I was calm. Carolyn had made dinner. She'd made pasta, something she knew I loved, and she'd lit candles on the table. And she asked me how Dean was, and I said he was good, and we ate together like a family. And I watched her from across the table and thought, you have no idea what I know. That week, I started making quiet preparations. I called the attorney my friend had recommended, same one who'd given me Lou Pratt's number, a woman named Judith Crane who specialized in family law. I didn't retain her yet. I just talked. I wanted to understand the landscape. I wanted to know where I stood financially, logistically as a parent. She walked me through the basics. North Carolina, equitable distribution, Aiden and Leah were both in high school, no custody battle in all likelihood. The house, the firm. I listened. I took notes. I also didn't move anything. I didn't change any accounts. I didn't move out. I didn't act differently, as far as I could tell. I kept going to the gym on my usual mornings. I kept cooking on weekends. I kept reaching for a hand on the couch, because stopping would have been a signal, and I wasn't ready to send signals yet. There was a weekend coming up that Carolyn and I had planned months ago. Our anniversary was October 12th. We'd reserved a cabin in the mountains for the weekend. Blue Ridge, about 2 hours from Charlotte. Just the two of us. She'd been looking forward to it. I had not canceled the reservation. I had, however, made a decision about what that weekend would be. The Friday before the trip, I came home from work to find Carolyn in the kitchen in a good mood, telling me about something funny that happened at her office. She was laughing. She looked beautiful. She always looked beautiful to me, even now, even with everything, which was its own kind of grief. After dinner, we were both reading in the living room, her on the couch, me in the armchair, and she looked up at me and said, "I'm really looking forward to the cabin." I said, "Me too." She said, "I feel like we haven't really been present with each other lately. You know? Like we've both been in our own heads." I looked at her. I said, "You might be right." She smiled. She went back to her book. And I sat there thinking, she is telling the truth about that one thing, even without knowing it. We drove up Saturday morning. The cabin was exactly what it always was. Good wood, high windows, a fire pit, a porch with mountain views, and the kind of quiet that you forget is possible until you're inside it. We unpacked. She opened a bottle of wine earlier than usual, which she sometimes did on vacation, and I didn't comment on it. We had an easy afternoon, walked the property, talked about Aiden's college applications, Leah's swim season, normal things. She touched my arm a lot, tucked herself against me when we sat on the porch watching the sun drop behind the ridge. It felt real. That's the cruelest part of all of it. It felt real. Even then, after dinner, the fire going, She poured us each another glass and sat across from me rather than next to me, and I thought, this is when she's going to say something. I could feel it. 19 years. She did. Owen, she said. She looked at her glass. I need to tell you something. I waited. She stopped. Started again. For the past several months, I've been seeing someone. She looked up. I'm not in love with him. I want you to know that. It's been a mistake. I know that now. I ended it 2 weeks ago. She was watching me carefully, waiting. I let the silence sit for a long moment. I know, I said. She blinked. I know about Connor Webb. I know about the hotel on Barclay Street. I know it's been going on since at least last November, which is closer to a year than several months. Her face went through several things at once. Shock. Shame. Something that was almost relief, and then, when she registered what I'd said about the timeline, a kind of dread. Owen. I'm not angry, I said, which was true in that moment. I was something colder than angry. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm going to tell you what I've been doing for the past month, and then I'm going to tell you what I'd been doing for the past month, and then I'm going to tell you what happens next. I told her about Lou Pratt. I told her about the report. I told her about Judith Crane. I told her I had documentation. I told her I had already begun understanding our financial and legal situation. I did all of this in the same voice I use in client meetings when I'm explaining why a design needs to change. Factual, measured, giving the other person no ambiguity about where they stand. She started crying halfway through. I didn't comfort her, not because I wanted to be cruel, but because comforting her in that moment felt like an erasure of what I was saying. I let her cry. I kept talking. When I finished, I poured myself more wine, sat back, and said, "Now I want to hear from you." Not the edited version, the real one. What she told me over the next 2 hours, and it took 2 hours because she stopped and started and cried and went quiet and started again, was this: she had met Connor Webb through work and it had started as genuine professional respect. Then lunches. Then she told herself it was nothing. Then she knew it was something and kept telling herself it was nothing. She said she didn't know exactly when it had become physical, but that it had been after the holidays last year. She said she did not love him. She said she had ended it because she wanted to try. Those were her words, try to save our marriage. I listened to all of it. Why didn't you end it sooner? I asked. She was quiet for a long time. I don't know, she finally said. I think I felt invisible for a long time. In our marriage. Like we were running the same routines and you were happy because the routines were good, and I was somewhere inside them not being seen. She shook her head. I'm not saying that justifies anything. I know it doesn't. I'm just trying to be honest with you because you asked. I sat with that. I didn't dismiss it. It wasn't entirely wrong. I had been absorbed in building the firm. The routines had been comfortable. I was capable of missing things. All right, I said. All right, she said. I heard you. I believe you about ending it, and I believe you that you don't love him. I looked at her. Here's what I can't do. I can't pretend the last year didn't happen. I can't go back to before this weekend and be the man who didn't know. That version of us is gone. If we're going to build something from this, it has to be something new. And the question is whether you want to do that kind of work. I do, she said immediately. Then, do you? I was honest. I don't know yet. I'm going to need time to find out. And while I'm finding out, I need total transparency from you. No contact with Connor Webb. I mean, none. Not professional, not accidental, not just to clarify something. 0. And we see a couples therapist, someone I've chosen, not someone we choose together, because right now I don't fully trust your judgment. She winced at that last part. But she said yes. We slept in the same bed that night because there was only one bed, and because there was only one bed, and because, strangely, it didn't feel wrong. She was awake a long time. So was I. But I wasn't in pieces. I was something more like deliberate. When we got home Sunday, I called Dean and told him what had happened. He said, "How do you feel?" I said I didn't know yet, but that I felt like myself. He said that was probably the right result. The following week, Carolyn reached out to Connor Webb's company. I know because I asked her to do it with me present. She sent an email. She was ending all professional contact. She wished his company well. She would be informing her supervisor that she needed to recuse herself from any future city projects involving his firm. She CC'd no one else. She pressed send. I watched her face when she did it. I was watching for relief, for regret, for anything that contradicted what she'd told me. I didn't see contradiction. I saw someone doing a painful thing carefully. We started seeing a therapist named Dr. Aldrich, who ran a practice in Dilworth. I found her through a referral and vetted her before I called. She was direct without being brutal, which was exactly what I needed. She didn't treat Carolyn as the villain and me as the victim, which I also needed, even if I wouldn't have admitted it. For the first 2 months, those sessions were the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Harder than building the firm. Harder than almost anything. Because you have to sit in a room and say the true things, not the defended things. You have to admit where you'd been absent, where you'd been coasting, where you'd made your work your primary relationship and your marriage a secondary project. I didn't enjoy admitting that, but I did it. There were nights I went to bed uncertain. Nights I lay there looking at the ceiling and wondered whether what I was doing was foolishness dressed up as wisdom. Nights I thought about Aiden and Liu. They didn't know, and we decided not to tell them unless we were unable to hold the marriage together. And I thought about what I wanted the story of their parents to be. I didn't want it to be a collapse. I also didn't want it to be a lie. Somewhere around the 4th month of therapy, something shifted. I can't point to the exact session or the exact conversation. It was more like a gradual correction, like when you adjust a building's orientation and eventually the light starts coming through differently. Carolyn stopped being careful around me and started being present. I stopped monitoring her and started talking to her. It wasn't the same as before. It was something more honest than before, which was harder and also more real. She did one more thing, about 6 months in, that I want to tell you about. One evening, she came to me with a folder. Inside was a printout of every session we'd had with Dr. Aldrich, her notes to herself, not the therapist's, and a personal letter she'd written. I don't want to share what the letter said because some things are private even when you're willing to be transparent. But I'll tell you it was long and undefended, and she'd clearly written it more than once because it had the quality of something revised into honesty. She sat down across from me and she said, "I don't want you to respond tonight. I just want you to have it." I read it that night after she was asleep. I read it twice. The second time through, I found myself thinking about the man I'd wanted to be after that Friday evening with Lou Pratt's report, the man who didn't collapse, the man who didn't become unrecognizable. I thought about what Dean had asked me. What do you want to walk away with? I had walked away with myself. Whatever else had happened, I hadn't lost that. We are still married. I want to be careful about how I say that. I don't say it as a triumphant statement, because it isn't triumphant. It is the result of a long, painful, sometimes humiliating process that I would not wish on anyone. But I also won't pretend it isn't real, or that it didn't require something genuine from both of us. There are days I still feel the scar of it. I expect that's permanent, the way certain kinds of damage are structural. You shore up the wall, you reinforce the foundation, but the evidence of what happened is still there in the material if you know where to look. I know where to look. What I know now that I didn't know before. A marriage can survive dishonesty if both people are willing to be honest afterward. That sounds simple. It is not simple. But it is true, or at least it has been true for us. Connor Webb, as it turned out, lost the city contract his firm had been angling for during that same period. I did not engineer that. It happened through the ordinary course of Carolyn recusing herself and the project being reassigned. He also, I was told by someone who had no reason to tell me, was dealing with similar turbulence in his own marriage, which had nothing to do with Carolyn specifically, and everything to do with the kind of man he apparently was. I don't take satisfaction in that, but I don't pretend it's irrelevant either. I have told this story to very few people. Dean knows all of it. Judith Crane knows the early chapters. Dr. Aldrich knows the whole thing in clinical terms. My children do not know. I hope they never need to. What I want to leave you with is this. The worst moment of all of it was not when I opened Lou Pratt's report. It was not the cabin. It was not any of the sessions with Dr. Aldrich, as brutal as some of those were. The worst moment was the week before the cabin, sitting across from my wife at dinner while she laughed about something that had happened at work, and thinking, I love her, and I don't know what to do with that. I love her, and I feel like a fool for loving her. I love her, and I don't know whether love, by itself, is enough to build anything on. It isn't enough, by itself. I know that now. Love is a material, not a structure. You still have to build. I am still building. I've thought a lot about why I didn't confront Carolyn the night I opened that report. People ask me that sometimes, the few who know the full story, and I think they expect me to say something about strategy or self-control. But honestly, it was simpler than that. I knew that the version of me who'd just seen those photographs wasn't capable of having the conversation that needed to happen. He was too raw. And raw isn't the same as honest. It's just loud. There's something nobody tells you about being betrayed by someone you love. The hardest part isn't the anger. Anger is actually the easy part. It has direction and energy, and it moves you forward even when forward is the wrong way. The hardest part is the grief that lives underneath the anger. The quiet realization that the life you thought you were living had a version running parallel to it, that you knew nothing about. That grief doesn't have anywhere to go. You just have to carry it while you figure out what to do next. Owen didn't blow up. Owen didn't beg. He did the harder thing, which was to sit with what he knew and decide, deliberately, what kind of man he was going to be on the other side of it. That's not passivity. That's not weakness. It is, I'd argue, one of the most demanding things a person can do. To feel the full weight of something and still choose your response rather than just react to it. What Carolyn did was wrong. I'm not going to soften that. A year of deliberate deception, sustained through ordinary dinners and ordinary mornings and a version of intimacy that had dishonesty running underneath it. That's not a mistake. A mistake is a single moment of poor judgment. What she did required continuous choice. She chose it, again and again, for months. And yet, the person who sat across from Owen at that cabin table, telling the truth, finally, without knowing what he already knew, that person was also real. The shame was real. The reckoning was real. People are rarely just one thing, which is one of the more inconvenient truths about being human. What I think about most, looking back, is what Dean asked. What do you want to walk away with? That question is a kind of moral technology. It doesn't tell you what to do. It just insists that you be honest about what you're actually trying to build, rather than just reacting to what's been taken from you. Owen wanted to walk away with himself intact, with his own judgment, his own dignity, his own clarity. He got that. Whatever happened after, he got that first. Treason doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it comes disguised as an ordinary Tuesday, a phone buzzing face down on a kitchen counter, a half-second of wrong expression on a familiar face. The people who navigate it best are not the ones who feel the least. They feel it fully. They just refuse to let the feeling be the only thing that decides what happens next. Intelligence is knowing what you're actually looking at. Ethics is deciding what to do about it honestly. Resilience is doing that over and over, even on the nights when you're lying awake on your side of the bed, wondering whether any of it is worth it. Most of the time, for Owen, it was.